What's up, Trekkies? It's your boy Wil Wofford here with Trekker's Delight, a Star Trek-inspired podcast. Before we get started, we're going to give away $100, so make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to our channel where we will announce the lucky winner every single week. Now, welcome to Trekker's Delight.
Hello, and welcome to the 6th episode of Techno Trek, Profound Ramifications of Replicators. Today I'm joined by Lord Deathman, who will help me discover some of the cool positives and negatives of replicators and what they have as they impact human civilization. Lord Deathman, thank you so much for being here. Are you ready to go?
I am. It's great to be here. I want to say thank you for having me here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion on replication and replicator technology.
Thanks so much. Please like, subscribe, comment. Please let us know what you think of all these things. Today we will be just having continuing our conversation on some of the ways that technology have impacted human civilization within the Star Trek world, of course, drawing upon our own world and thinking about how these things in our real world now and in their nascent forms are sort of changing and growing, and how they could possibly impact our civilization in the future, leading to a utopia, a dystopia, whatever you want to call Star Trek, to the Federation, to those things. Often we talk about the larger implications of starships and shielding and all those things, and I would love to actually talk about inertial dampeners at one point. But replicators are a real world thing. Not that we have actual replication technology, but we do have the ability to sort of create things in a three-dimensional matrix. You have 3D printers. You have all sorts of possibilities with this technology. Of course, it's very sophisticated in the Star Trek world, but really we're interested in the question of what would this do to us as a civilization, as a population. So I'm hoping Lord Deathman can shed some light on some of these issues. Right now, I'm going to open the conversation window here, just an introduction. This is episode 6, and I'm joined by Lord Deathman, of course, who's going to be tagging along and helping me shape this conversation. Of course, this is brought to you by Trekker's Delight. Techno Trek is one of the shows in the umbrella of Trekker's Delight. Please check out the other shows. I'm sure you'll enjoy them. And the quote for today: the ramifications of having such advanced technology on human civilization. What are the overall profound ramifications? So, Lord Deathman, take it away, if you could read this for us again.
Absolutely. So, the future set world of Star Trek is frequently depicted as a quasi-utopia where humanity is unburdened by the ills of scarcity, hatred, greed, and inequality. One of the most significant contributing factors to the state of this future society is its advanced technology. And on today's show, we discuss some of the fantastic technology of Star Trek and how it shapes Gene Roddenberry's vision of humanity. And today's topic is replicators. As Manny has said, replicators are a key technology in the Star Trek universe. They're one of those game-changing technologies which contributed heavily to the utopia that's depicted in Star Trek. But Star Trek is a drama, and so things are done for dramatic reasons, but we wanted to take time out, carve out a little bit of discussion time to say, hey, what would be the real world ramifications of having a replicator? Is there anything going on in the real world that sort of matches up with replicator technology? How far is the reality away from the speculation when it comes to Star Trek? And Manny, if you'll permit me, replicators or replication type technology in Star Trek has a long and storied history, which I'm just going to try to sum up here in a couple of words. When we first saw the original series, they had something that was called a food synthesizer in the TOS series. And if I remember this correctly, and you hardcore Star Trek fans, feel free to just police me and keep me honest here. But they had a food synthesizer which had these colored cubes, which I think it was assumed those colored cubes were like combined proteins that a machine could then sort of rearrange into the semblance of foods that you were familiar with. So it basically had all the building blocks in these cube-like structures, and then those cube structures could be turned into types of food. So not exactly replication, but getting closer to that. I would say that was 22nd century Star Trek, 23rd century actually. In the 22nd century, with Archer and the Enterprise crew, they had an even more cruder device, which I believe they called a protein synthesizer, which also seemed to be able to make rudimentary foods if you supplied the machine with a baseline amount of energy and a baseline amount of protein. So you needed something to put into the replicator that was already matter in order to change it into some other basic form of matter. So it was actually even hinted on an episode of Star Trek Enterprise that they were taking waste material and reconstituting that back into food, if as weird as that might sound. And then, of course, by the time you hit the 24th century with Star Trek: The Next Generation, you have the full replicator as we understand it in modern Trek today. You have a device which you give it input of energy and it gives you output of matter. And that matter is not limited to organic matter. You can replicate machines, weapons, complex chemical structures and formations in a replicator. And, even just talking about this technology kind of gets me excited, Manny. How do you feel about it?
The same, because not only the implication, but like the on-screen presence of the replicator is so profound, and has had political implications, has had economic implications, social implications. One of my favorite moments is when Eddington steals the industrial replicators on DS9. Like
Yes.
That's the thing that he gave up the uniform for. He's like, why are you sending? So for me, or the scene in Voyager where she synthesizes water out of thin air, like transports it
Right.
down. It's
Right.
wild stuff that they can just, it's like magic if you don't understand it. So it's wild. Like, and to know that in the real world that something similar could be created one day. There was recently a scene and I'm just remembering all of these as you're speaking. There's recently a scene in Star Trek Discovery in the future, and the Admiral very shockingly tells them, it's our shit, right?
Right. Yeah, I fondly remember that moment.
It's great. Even Rom talking about waste extraction. Waste extraction is very important. He's using our own waste to power the replicators. First of all, it didn't occur to me that that's where all this raw molecular stuff was coming from, but it makes perfect sense. And then B, it kind of reminds me of like even other sci-fi, like The Matrix. There's a scene where they're talking about chicken. Like, how do you know what chicken tastes like? So
right.
There's these implications, but I loved what you just said. Please keep going.
Yeah. When you think about the scale of a device in terms of replication, you mentioned industrial replicators, which I think we were first introduced to those on DS9, like you were saying, with Eddington. There's another episode where Bajorans are trying to get industrial replicators onto Bajor for relief after a certain catastrophe there. So, you could have a huge scale replicator to make raw materials for housing, for farming and agriculture. There's when you think about the device at scale, it becomes even more incredible, this technology in Star Trek. And I was recently talking to a fellow Trekker who was like, whenever you see someone go EVA in Star Trek and they have on their EVA suit, and for the reasons of drama, they will run out of oxygen. There's usually like, oh, you've got 30 minutes left. But if you could get the replicator miniaturized, you could have a way of replicating oxygen continuously, right? As long as there was some kind of energy source, maybe even solar. If you're out there and you're within the proximity of a star, that's an endless supply of energy if you could make it happen that way. So the writers of Star Trek, showrunner Kurtzman, I gave you that one for free. That one's yours.
That's amazing. I had never thought of that insight before. My God.
Well, I can't quite take credit for it. I was talking to a friend who
That's okay.
pointed it
Give him a
out.
shout out. That's fantastic. I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. So we're going to talk about the positive parts right now
Yeah.
of what would the positive ramification be? Here's the first one. Take it away.
Absolutely. So, first off, you got economic ramifications to having a device that makes things out of thin air. Again, you input energy and it makes things. So, that would reduce the labor associated with traditional food production, and not just food production, but really production of anything that you have on the planet. So, you you really do create that utopia in the sense that people can work less and that their work product isn't necessarily tied to some arbitrary type of currency, be it the crypto world or just fiat currency or whatever. Now you can divorce labor somewhat from the economics of it when you have a situation where the basics that are needed to maintain human existence can sort of be brought out in from thin air, though. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. As you're talking, I'm just thinking about um, how do our current economic situation work. We have 3D printers, even industrial 3D printers that make houses,
Yeah,
all the way down to like little ones, and we are creating bioreactors. I don't know if you've read about these. These are
I have. Yeah, amazing
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, and they're opening new plants and stuff like that. You're going to create meat from nothing. The old problem with meat being created cell by cell was that it had no scaffold, so it didn't have the same uh, cartilaginous or stringiness or like the consistency
The
of meat.
consistency. Yeah.
Right. And so they've overcome that with certain protein scaffolding. Fantastic stuff. The mosaic that they work with, the extracellular matrices, and making it more like an actual thing. And they're also trying to do it with chickens, a little tougher. Um, but yeah, like, why are we using our physical labor to,
Right.
one of the great scenes in the new Picard, again, it's profound to me, and I don't know how other people's, when he's on the vineyard and there's a machine just going back and forth, just like immediately transporting like the
The
grapes
grapes right off the vine.
right off the
That is
vine.
so wonderful, Manny. I'm so glad that you brought that up because a migrant picker doesn't have to spend valuable time in their short human existence doing something as mundane as picking fruit off of a tree, and that's a lot of what I talk about, or what I tried to convey with this particular point, is those economic ramifications. You're getting paid a wage for a day's work to do this picking, but if you had an anti-grav unit tied to a transporter and you could pull that stuff right off of the vine, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I feel the same way. And you encapsulated exactly the fact that our human existence is so short. However much longer we can get it in Star Trek, it's still comparably still very short. And in the Star Trek world, one of the things that I love is that the value that they have as a whole is to try to enrich people's lives with experiences and activities, and like, what should you be doing with your life? Making yourself better. Like, that
Right.
is the societal goal. Like, people want you they're like, you shouldn't be doing this. You should be like, if you want to go pick grapes as a zen, as a
Right.
yoga. Like, go do dishes
as
just to, you know.
as an optional thing that you can do to enrich yourself rather than the means of your survival is what
Right.
this really comes down to. So when you look at this equation of giving someone back their time, sure, you could use that time to enrich yourself, become self-actualized, pursue some other line of science that you might not have thought of before, or in this utopia, you could use that time to be lazy.
Yes.
And it's up to you is really the beauty of what this device sort of, the gift that it brings to humanity in that speculative context.
It really would change our industry. And like, for me, I often still lament the fact that we have like brick and mortar stores. It's dumb. I don't get it. Like, eventually we'll hit a place like,
Yeah.
this space should be used in different ways. Like, it's nice
Someone
to
could
have,
be living in it,
yeah,
instead of things.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you can just order or see like one of those carousels of what you would look like in this shirt or what do you look like in these, and then have it like made to order. And not
Right.
only is that probable, it's possible. Like, it's within the realm of current possibility where you could start to manufacture things on order, like on
Right.
spec. Like, yeah,
Yeah, and there's less waste involved in a scenario like that. We're not overproducing anything.
yeah,
We're not suffering with the logistical challenges of how to get food to people who need it
yeah,
versus giving people who don't need food too much of it that goes bad. So food on demand, or even supplies on demand out of a replica really changes our waste profile, everything related to the economics of it, and also the I would say the environmental impact there is big, but we're going to get to that in a later point. I don't want to spoil it just yet,
no,
though.
it's
But we're
okay.
talking economic ramifications right now.
Definitely, it would change the way our, how like 0 point energy or like free energy would sort of change our economy in one way. Free food or free replication technology would also baseline our material goods so that we no longer, I think also we would no longer prize them in a similar way. Like, people talk about like name brands or having like certain things, whatever. But when everyone has equal access to all things,
Right.
you it will change and modulate the way that we and give feedback in a way like, oh, you're just wearing pants, you're just wearing shirts.
Right. You are
It wouldn't
wearing the same shiny pair of 25th century pants as I am.
You design your own, be your
Yeah.
own design.
Yeah.
Like, it would just be part of like your life cycle. It'd be like, oh, I'm gonna design a pair of pants today. Like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
so I'll kick it over to the next one. That was good. There's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah. So this is a big one. Our next point is really about eradicating hunger, malnutrition, and all forms of food insecurity. So not only today in this world do we have people who are just going hungry because there is no food available, you also have people in developed parts of the world that suffer from food insecurity and that they're not getting enough to eat that to meet the demands and the requirements of keeping a human system going during
Yeah,
the course of the day. They're also suffering, perhaps not from the extreme forms of malnutrition that you might get in developing parts of the world. And I feel like the language developing is a euphemism for something else, but that's a different conversation.
wow,
But yeah, the replicator effectively eliminates that kind of stuff, and again, it allows you to climb the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It allows you to get closer to the top of that pyramid because basic needs are being taken care of. This way you can make more useful contributions to society. If you'd like to join the Starfleet, join the engineering corps on Earth, become an architect, do all of those things. Or if you feel like your time is better spent in leisure, the pursuit of leisure and some other things, or maybe you want to spend your time seeing the galaxy, there's recourse for you, and I think, Manny, not to divert too much in this discussion, but there's obviously going to be the person who's very comfortable on Earth during this utopia, really liking what there is to offer there, liking the security, the protection. And there are probably going to be people who are like, I don't know, I feel a bit more restless. I'd rather take my chances, and go out and sort of break ground on a new colony in another part of the galaxy, and they want to have that experience that's a little closer to what things were like before utopia. And I think it's such a big universe, it's a big galaxy, that you
definitely,
can kind of pursue that based on the fact that there's a foundation or a core of security that the replicator as a device brings.
definitely, and yes, definitely key in this place. There have been some great moments where maybe like when Harry or Chakotay, I think they were like trying to get some replicator to work. I think they were in the far flung future and like, oh wow, it still works. Like something important, like in that sense, we're replicators in a space that's far away from Earth, far away from safety, and far away from plenty. is everything to the colonist or everything to the person who really needs it. In the real world, sorry, did I cut you off there?
No, not at all. Please
Sorry.
continue.
In the real world, one of the I have a degree in biology, and I had to study how certain diseases in what you would you've referred to the developing world, one of them being blindness, was solved by the addition of nutrients into certain food. So one of the examples is, I think it was vitamin K insinuated into rice. It became called golden rice in India. I don't know if you've heard of this.
I have not, but this sounds fascinating.
It was about 15, 20 years ago. They found that people were going blind because they were only eating rice. So they were missing certain enzymes and certain vitamins, specifically vitamin K.
Nutrients, vitamins that support eye health. Yeah.
So and when you're exclusively eating just this one staple, and then they found that there were so many things cropping up, they found, okay, well, why don't we just change the genetic structure of the rice
to incorporate the missing piece?
K.
Yeah.
And that could be easily done. Like, we enrich foods in the Western world. You'll often see, turn package of bread over or whatever, say vitamin C or some vitamin in there. Like, you don't even realize that you're taking it in. Iodine is in our salt, and we enrich our food just like passively and stuff like that. But that doesn't always happen in the other parts of the world. And the replicator will probably monitor and ensure that we take in the correct amount of whatever proteins and minerals that we need on a daily basis. I don't know how that feedback would work, but in an everyday basis, I feel like the replicator would help ensure that we're nutritionally not deficient, not just food insecure.
That's actually, I love it when things like this come up in the discussion, because you're tying the advanced medicine of the Star Trek universe to the replicator, in that if you go and get a regular checkup from Dr. Crusher or sexy 24th century doctor of your choice, you then get a report that you're deficient in certain vitamins, minerals, enzymes, whatever, then you can probably just get an algorithm, a card, some type of input to put in your replicator to make sure that what you are replicating is fortified with the things you're missing biologically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So again, in the real world, with hunger, malnutrition, and food insecurity, a lot of arable land is now being destroyed in different parts of the world for different reasons. Climate change and the Amazon for grazing and cattle. We eat way more meat than we used to, so it takes way more land and water per square inch and footage to actually raise that. I think California deals with issues with almonds and cashews and avocados. They have a huge water footprint and stuff. So there's certain crops that we as a population have put into high demand, which have come at the expense of other resources that may have led to food insecurity and hunger, even in our own countries, in the Western world. So imagine what is happening in the other parts of the world, where maybe those people have less human rights, or they're unable to. I know in India very recently they had the largest revolution in human history. 250 million Indians rebelled against the practices of farming, where Modi tried to come in and tell them that we are going to replace your natural farming balance or whatever with industrial farming. And
so interesting.
It's crazy how, and everyone just said, absolutely, the cost of onions is the cost of onions. There is no way to change the cost, because all of their crops would have gone to, and just like how Monsanto or whatever, they make the seeds proprietary, so farmers can't actually replant their own seeds.
It's crazy. Yeah.
It's wild that this is the way that things are. So replicators would just subvert all of those systems overnight.
Yeah.
Anyway, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think we got to the heart of that one. I'm ready to move on to our next point.
Let's check it out.
See what we have in store.
Oh,
and we were just touching on this, right?
Yeah,
so we're about to segue into this discussion, but basically we relieve agro-related environmental pressures from the planet. So we reduce the acreage that needs to be dedicated just for food production. We
Mm,
also limit the amount of greenhouse gases, anything that would be toxic or counterproductive to the environment being released as a part of traditional agriculture. So we get a pass in terms of the environmental pressures that we tend to put on the planet. Now, I know there's a big debate about climate change, all of that kind of stuff going on. Some people believe it, some people don't. But I think it's hard to point to the science and not say that something is happening, even if you don't believe it's entirely negative or whatever your political spin might be on it. Something is happening, and sometimes it can be for the benefit and sometimes it isn't. But in any case, the replicator, by making food on demand for those who need it in smaller spaces, not only do we eliminate the economic and labor pressures that go with that, but we also get to have a cleaner planet and perhaps even a better environmental balance between the organisms that are on the planet, like the cow that we would traditionally have to slaughter for a good burger. Now we might replicate one. Those animals get to, reproduce at their natural pacing. We can give land that we might have used for agricultural purposes for their grazing purposes. We might
totally
be able
agree.
to strike a better ecological balance that
Yes.
isn't necessarily based on predation.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say that we would start to rewild the planet
Yeah,
because it wouldn't have the same footprint. Farming would move in a different way. Like there are better practices of farming that involve spaces between patches that are just totally wild, and it
right.
helps with the wild type. So you don't have monoclonal, like where you have just one kind of crop just in a row, in a row, in a row, and it's really bad for the soil. You have different things that change up, whatever, and you have parts that are just wilded again. But also, in, as you said, acreage and like taking up like the actual physical footprint on the planet by having replicators that can supply us with all the things that we need for food and also for like, I'm assuming, fuel and
Yeah,
other things that like actually go into those in water and stuff like that, and resequencing these things. The land itself would have better uses. So when we talk about agriculture, maybe we're growing, like for instance, Picard. He's growing grapes because he wants them to taste a certain way, probably.
yes, yes.
You know what I mean? That's why he has the luxury or has the permit to be so luxurious. And people also like vineyards.
Right.
That's the thing is while it's nice to have a Amazon, it's nice to have a vineyard. Like different parts of the ecology now become more natural, or they're shaped in a way that humans find pleasing and work within those systems and with those other organisms. It's more ecologically friendly, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is hinted, and we are going to talk about this in the cons section, that a replicated item and a natural grown item or naturally produced item might have certain differences in their quality or taste profile, depending on, what that item is, whether it's food, clothing, et cetera, et cetera. So
Nice.
we're not just, this is not a one-sided discussion that sort of puts the replicator in the most positive light. I just want to let the listeners know.
Okay, let's check out the next. Oh, take us there. Take us there.
There it is, right? So waste extraction can recycle our waste products by resequencing them into replicated items. So this is ecological and it's very efficient, right? So again, we hinted that in the earlier history of the Star Trek universe, like with the Star Trek Enterprise series, they had a rudimentary protein resequencer. I believe that is what the device
I
is
think so.
called,
Yeah.
and it takes proteins that are in one form and takes them and turns them into another form. It's hinted at, taking our waste products and literally turning, perhaps, liquid waste can be turned back into water, drinkable water that isn't harmful and is free of the toxins and poisons from the source material.
Yeah.
The same thing for solid waste. And this isn't like the most pleasant discussion to have, but at the same time, even for practical reasons, Manny, if you're on a starship and you're making a long 5-year journey, you've got to find a way to push resources. And so the breakthrough of energy to matter conversion and back again, right, when it comes to transporters and replicators, are key to our ability to explore space. So I think that's where, my mind was at when I sort of talked about this as a con. It allows for longer distance missions because your resources can go a little farther.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the problems with current space travel, right, is what do you do when you want to recycle your oxygen? What do you want to do in your carbon dioxide? What do you do with your space toilets? What is actually like they're recycling their urine? That's fine, but reclamation of feces and your body has other waste products. So you don't think about it, but there are other things
Yeah,
coming out of your
sweat.
skin. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So in a long voyage like that, you are dependent on your own reclamation. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing to me that we have the technology in that future to like separate things atomically,
Right.
and you
Right.
can just be like, well, how does it know and how does it do that? It's wild. So, and then resequencing them, like let's say, okay, well, I'm gonna have a pattern and I'm basically gonna put all of these things in a row again and it's gonna come out the way I want. I mean, it's wild. Like I can't imagine the technology that would
Yeah.
actually do these sorts of things, but it would eliminate so many health problems. Like I
Right.
think in the Americas, you have a lot of pig farms, pig lagoons. Um, in India, they have problems with like defecation. In China as well, they have outdoor toilets. So there are like programs to try to bring people back into using. But there is problems with like the diseases that are born out of like fecal matter that are like that should be eliminated. That don't end up being. It's an actual real world health problem. So by recycling our actual waste at the source, you would save just so much water, so much infrastructure and housing, and it would shape and change our discourse on waste in a different way.
Yeah. Truly creating self sustaining ecosystems and not worrying about the scarcity of a resource that we're going to completely run out of water. We're going to completely run out of resource X, Y, or Z. When you're able to put a 1-to-1 ratio around recycling things, it also even would make us more cognizant of our biology. Like you said, we have a lot of different waste products as biological beings that we might not even be aware of. You might even start thinking, perhaps on a philosophical level, that you're putting yourself, a bit of yourself, back into yourself, right?
Yeah.
Every time you have that drink of water. And yeah, again, it's one of those exciting speculative technologies that really makes the Star Trek universe so unique and so fun in terms of the cohesive society that they've created and the ability to sort of iterate on these devices over time, Manny. I love the idea that we start with the food synthesizer, we move to a protein sequencer, and then that device becomes more sophisticated and becomes a full-on replicator. We master the energy to matter, because I'm not a theoretical physicist, so you might have to help me here, Manny. But you split the atom, you release all this incredible energy. The smallest unit of matter, one split, releases this incredible amount of energy, and it is so hard to think that we couldn't find a way to harness that energy and turn it back to matter. But I also want to touch on something you said about it would be difficult to even conceive of how the replicator works. But if we were applying it to modern day metaphors and analogies, there'd have to be some kind of scanning technology, something that could look at a hamburger or mashed potatoes on the molecular level and say, well, hey, it has this, that, and in this combinations with this much water. Now the fidelity at which it could be recreated would be another story. You might, not get your mother's nice and lumpy mashed potatoes out of the replicator, but you're certainly, the fidelity of the scanner must be able to say, I can, replicate this with a certain level of confidence that you could eat it and not die. So like a spare piece of bulkhead sitting in a cargo bay could be put through a replicator and turned into dinner, for like 40 people on the 10th deck by 10 forward. No one goes to see Guinan for a meal.
That's so true. That's so true, man. I don't know how to quantify the change that this would do to our population.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
And really our understanding of matter, of reality, and again, I tend to get metaphysical, as you know, but once you've mastered the idea that matter and energy are interchangeable, it must fundamentally change your understanding of the nature of reality.
That's true.
The infinite and the microscopic are all becoming kind of one instance of the same unity in the universe.
Yeah. Okay.
that was okay. We need like scientists, if you're a science person, physicist, genetics, you understand energy, because we're talking about these things purely speculatively. If you can jump in and sort of correct some of our stuff, as it were, please.
Fine.
Yeah.
No, I love that point. I will make a point of saying it. I loved the ramifications of what you just said, which is when you think of yourself as a matter and energy being, and you realize that everything is wavelengths and frequencies and patterns, then you start to live in a way that's kind of free of the prejudice of whatever morphology that you have. And then I bet you move in space and time a very different way. So
Right.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Wonderful.
This is the next slide.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, there was a little bit of a lag for me, but I am up to speed now. So,
nice.
The matter to energy conversion process associated with replicators theoretically provide inexhaustible resources, and there's no better way to explain that. That's literally the explanation. It becomes so fundamental and so mind-blowing that, again, once you crack the code of matter and energy being interchangeable, you now have this theoretically inexhaustible supply of both energy and resources, right? So again, self-sustaining environments that have nearly zero entropy in terms of what gets put in and what gets put out, in terms of what you can pull out of it, which has to lead to some extent to a utopia. And I don't think any fan of Star Trek says that the Star Trek utopia, quote unquote, is perfect. It is obviously a far better state of affairs than, say, life in the 21st century, but it is not without its ills. It's just those things have been brought down to a very, very low level. And because of that, we are able to pursue things that might not have been on the table. And again, I'm going to digress just for a second here, but once you have that first contact event with another spacefaring species because you discovered warp, that's usually how it works in Star Trek. They know that you're going to be out in the stars. So now they come and visit you and they're like, well, hey, dude, there is a galactic community out here. So get ready, right? Get ready. This is kind of like a greeting and a welcome to that community. And it's also a warning. It's like, we're all out here. We're doing our thing. And, maybe you might want to think about coalition. You might want to think about alliance. There are a lot of things we can kind of put in your ear, just like the Vulcans did with the humans, right? In terms of our first contact experience. That's true. Yeah. But warp, which is a technology we're going to cover in another show, moving faster than the speed of light. It's a part of that matter and energy, sort of equation, and having these theoretically inexhaustible resources. We know that any system that exists with friction and in a real world has to have some energy loss in it. So it's not going to be a perfect one-to-one conversion, and you won't have any waste. But the waste would be so insignificant as to allow for almost interstellar, intergalactic journeys in a starship, which again makes exploration colonization of the many worlds that would be available to us in other galaxies, in our own
Mhm.
galaxy. It makes all of those things a reality. And it again, it's just mind blowing to have a piece of popular speculative science fiction that's in pop culture that theorizes that we have an inexhaustible supply of resources and energy.
I love it, and I agree with you completely. What I would also add to that, and it occurred to me as you were speaking, is let's say you are a colonist on a new world, and there's only so many of you, and there's only so many resources, and you're far away from like a lot of technical expertise or whatever. I'm sure that with your pad and a replicator, you could just like copy paste or like paint by numbers any number of like huge technical specifications. Like you need to build something like really elaborate or big, like a hospital or something really big, whatever, piece by piece, or like something like you can be like, okay, well, where does this fit? The thing will just tell you, go and replicate this part. You go over to the replicator, it takes it out, and then you put it into the appropriate part. You can build larger, more complex structures step by
Right.
step,
Yeah.
you
Piece
know,
by piece,
piece by
right?
piece.
And we assume that people that are leaving the safe confines of United Earth, they're going out into the frontier because they want to have experiences that are a little closer to their ancestors. They want to engage in that kind of labor and building things with their own hands, that kind of thing. So, again, utopia might not be for everybody, but with the universe being as big as it is, you can start from scratch somewhere else. But even as you said, Manny, those people could rely on replication technology to build out schematics of hospitals and post offices,
Hmm.
fire stations,
Hmm.
things that are just really basic that you're going to need, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel on that one. Even if
That's
you
right.
want to grow your own bespoke crops to get that specific, flavor.
Sure. I like that. Now, these are some of the negative
Yeah.
ramifications. We haven't, we've talked about the positives of replication and stuff like that. But there might be a downside. There might be something that takes away from the human experience. So I'll let you read the first one.
Absolutely. So it would render all tangible goods into commodities. So there would be a sense of things being mass produced. The hamburger that you asked for from supplement number 6 or card number 6
Right.
that you put into the replimat is the same as the hamburger that somebody else got. And on a level of food, that might not be so bad because you're just satisfying basic human need for sustenance. But in the case of crafts, we take arts and crafts fairly seriously as a species. We value the bespoke item that was created by one craftsman and given to another human being or sold to that person as a unique item or unique
Yeah.
keepsake. And replicators make everything the same. They're unless someone writes an algorithm that could turn a replicator into a craftsman, everything is really going to be about commodity level goods, which I would say takes some of the artistry out of being a human being, if that makes sense to you, Manny.
It does. It does. I know that people don't like some of the Star Trek movies, but there's a great scene in Insurrection. Listen, I love them all. They have their
Yeah.
own thing,
Yeah.
whatever. You may not like them, but I liked it. Um, they talk about apprenticing for 40 years, and
Yeah.
the tech they make he makes I think she makes him a blanket,
I
like
think
the
it was a blanket. Yeah, if you're right. If we're both not mistaken about that, it was a blanket.
and he's for someone who like him is like an anthropologist, like someone who is actively thinking about like different cultures of the past and like the amazing textiles that they made, and the weave, that's just the weave pattern, but just like the implications of that you can get a culture, society to the point where they can make these amazingly complex goods that are beautiful artistic pieces, functional as well. Part of that beauty is the functionality. But he's like, can you imagine like apprenticing for 40 years, like in their world of replication where goods can be made at the drop of a dime and that they are more homogenized.
Right.
Those sorts of things would, I think, make much more of an impact. I think there's a reason why they seek the uniqueness of other cultures is because they're a bit flavorless. at
Yeah.
times.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Literally and figuratively,
Yeah,
flavorless.
yeah, absolutely. But I get it. Anything else on that?
No, no, I think we can move on to our next negative. Yeah. So this one's a big one. Replicators might have the tendency to dull human evolutionary instincts and ambition. We are, I would say, a predator species that was not created to sort of, I mean, there's a lot of compassion in being a human being. Obviously, we went from Cro-Magnon to Neanderthal, and each time we got a little bit smarter, a little more self-aware, but there's still that need to hunt, to look for threats, and if that type of evolutionary instinct gets dulled by the fact that we've cracked this energy to matter conversion uh, quandary, if you will, and we don't really have much to do in the way to ensure our survival personally, we could find ourselves, even just in the galactic community, falling prey to some of these species out there who do have more keener, sharper, refined evolutionary instincts in terms of survival, hunting, problem solving. And replicators do have, yeah, I think there's that dangerous edge in which you become too reliant on them. And yeah, life becomes sort of day in and day out kind of the same for you, getting the same kinds of resources, the same commodities, eating the same foods, and not really honing the instinct to be human on a fundamental level. But I
Yeah.
know this is a controversial one, Manny, but I'm very, very excited to hear what you think about it.
A couple of things come to mind. One, definitely, I think about the Cisco scene about him becoming a chef and how his father insisted on him cooking, and there are other scenes in Star Trek where they talk about eating real food for the first time and stuff like that. He's only ever had replicated food, and
Right.
working for, like, I have worked for my dinner. I've had that situation where I've worked all day,
Yeah.
dug up the food that I was actually going to like, or caught the food that I was going to make that day, and an exhausted sort of sense at the end of the day at twilight when you're making these whatever food that you're making, and you made it all yourself. You dug up the cucumbers, you boiled the beans, you dug up the potatoes, you caught the fish. There is
Yeah.
a totally different taste to that feeling.
Yeah, there's a feeling that comes with it too, a feeling of satisfaction. And again, this could all be biological, evolutionary programming and instincts, but can't be the same as ordering number 6 on the replicator. You can't get the same feeling, right?
I am also thrown. What also comes to me is the book The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. In the future, the Eloi and the Morlocks, I believe the Morlocks.
Yeah.
There's we become these two species, and the Eloi, they're basically well fatted and well fed, so the Morlocks can feed on them.
Yep.
But they're idyllic, they're just, and so in a way we are fattening ourselves or being
Yeah.
fatted in order to be consumed by others. So
By Morlocks.
Space
Yeah.
Morlocks.
Space Morlocks. AKA Klingons? I don't know. No. Klingons don't eat humans, I don't think.
Yeah. But I mean, in the larger metaphorical
Gorn
sense. But yeah.
eat humans. There we go. Gorn.
There's a great scene at a Gorn wedding in the new Lower Decks.
Oh, what? Gorn wedding. Oh, man, I got to catch up on my Lower Decks. Man.
Oh,
it's
so
awesome.
Funny. But speaking about dulling that instinct or whatever, here's what I would argue both sides. Once upon a time, as we were hunters and gatherers and nomadic and moving around, and we did that for like hundreds of thousands of years in different forms and shapes. The modern Homo sapien form was about 500,000 years old. And let's say the newest, most closely resembling form was about 250,000 years ago. And so, and we were hyper focused in a way on our environment that made us, we were uniquely tuned into it. To put in different words, we could feel the environment in a different way that we don't feel in it. We're already detached from it. So
right.
You could hear things and sense things and just the disturbance in the air or smell things in a way. Your physical body structure was more hardy.
Yep.
Simply by the way that evolution works, right? You had so many kids, so many died, and you moved on and you became hardier and hardier and hardier. You had less genetic inborn disorders that were allowed to move to the non-lethal stage of reproduction and so forth. And that's how evolution sort of works with a certain gene drift.
Selection. Yeah.
Selection, right? Like selection. Until you get this human product. Now, 10,000 years ago, after the last ice age or whatever, in the Delta Plains or wherever you want to call it, we finally, and in different places, this happened actually at different times, civilization sprung up, and for the first time, we domesticated ourselves.
Yeah.
We were, the agricultural revolution or evolution of our species tamed us. And suddenly our gut bacteria changed, we had cattle, we coexisted with animals in a certain way, and we stayed on the same land. And we had an identity, we built cities. The movement of human beings has already been happening for the last 10,000 years. So we've already been kind of shaping and domesticating our own bioprint,
Right.
Our flora and our fauna. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that if you follow and extrapolate what you're talking about, Manny, then it means that these newer technologies that get speculated about in Star Trek could lead to another evolution. Perhaps our physical capabilities begin to atrophy to a certain extent. And I mean, it's not like, for those of you who don't watch Star Trek, it's not like everybody just sits around kind of real lazy on a couch, like replicating food all day. No, you can go rock climbing and there's still sports to play and you can challenge yourself in many ways, even without leaving the planet. So I don't want Manny and I to create the false sense that, the people of Star Trek literally are the Eloi, like, being bred to be eaten by some other species. But, I mean, you might see some of that physical acuity decline a little bit. I don't know what that would look like, but it could be replaced by greater mental capabilities. You might, find yourself branching off into that sixth sense that we've been positing in science fiction for quite a long time. So, you never know how living side by side with these technologies could result in the next human evolution, which I think Star Trek just, as a canon, as a fandom, as a document kind of says that's what we're going for. We're pushing human evolution, human thought patterns to that next level.
And that ambition as well. We don't want to say we're not listless as a people. We don't just have all of this abundance in front of us and then do nothing. Like there is an ethos to sort of push each other into these different spaces. I don't know how effective it is, but that is the argument.
It's probably on a case by case basis. Yeah.
Okay, one more.
Yeah. Here we go.
This is the last one.
Indeed. And this has been an awesome discussion, Manny, by the way. It's such sweet sorrow to be on the last one. I could talk about this stuff forever. But, we lose the need for industry and industrial infrastructure to make things without replicators. So factories, manufacturing plants, reliance on replicators would create a sort of a dependence. And this may sound a little bit like the last point that we were talking about in terms of dulling instinct, but this really, I think Manny and I wanted to break this out into something that was really distinct, because replicators really mean the end of all industrial revolutions. This is like the apex of an industrial revolution. It's over. You no longer have to get people involved in an 8-hour workday. You don't have to set up special facilities for them to go and labor for whether it be 1 hour a day or 8 hours a day. That's no longer necessary. And again, there is the dependence on these things from a planet-wide, whether you have an in-home replicator or you're going out to the Replimat with friends. If the energy grid fails, if something happens, that you don't have those skills to go out and manufacture food. You don't know how to grow food. And even if you did, it would take some time. So we do create a very unique situation of dependence, which and there have been a couple of episodes where Earth's, energy grid has been compromised. There's been a blackout. Also DS9, which really does a good DS9 does such a good job of stress testing the idea of utopia in Star Trek, right? It really puts it under pressure. And once again, in an episode involving the changelings, we see what it looks like when Earth is under siege and
Love
the
that.
power grid is taken out. So that means replicators are down. People can't get to food, resources, things like that.
Yeah.
And I really thought it was worth mentioning that state of dependence, and I'd love to get your thinking on that, man, your perspective.
It's exactly what you said. Like once you've taken down these, like right now we have like huge steel plants and like timber mills and sawmills and huge tracts of land that are like dedicated to a specific purpose, like just huge smelting plants, and like we have huge industry to do all of these like big things because we need them, and we need them in huge amounts. Like you need a bunch of steel bars, you need a bunch of like self-sealing stem bolts, whatever you
wing nuts. Obviously, neither one of us is in manufacturing.
You're right.
But yes, you need something in a large quantity urgently.
Yeah. And you just it's really good for the planet that you don't have these huge footprints of like big factories and whatever, but on those days when there is no electricity, right? They came to Cisco's because he had food.
Right, because he had real food laying around that didn't require it to be replicated. Yeah. I mean, even things like building a starship happens off-world. They're done on shipyards. So, I'd imagine the shipyards are using raw materials, ores that they might be mining from other planets. I mean, it's possible that some of it could be replicated, but starships are huge, so that might even go beyond industrial replication.
Yeah.
I think you might have to do that the good old fashioned way of strip mining, hopefully a planet that doesn't have any sentient life on it.
Right.
In order to do that. So even the manufacturing of our main apparatus for space exploration is off-world.
Yeah.
Asteroid
mining is a huge, I know that you don't think about it, but like they are actually in the real world thinking about asteroid mining. They've sent up probes. China sent one, I think, and America sent one. They took videos and they took core samples, and these asteroids are just worth trillions and trillions of dollars in terms of like the metals that they have and the gases, even, right? You need helium.
Yeah.
We need like
gas,
all that stuff. And the moon is actually really rich in both certain types of helium and water.
Right.
Weirdly enough, right? So once we go out into the universe and we start collecting all these raw resources, whatever, it totally makes sense that shipyards are like off planet because gravity is kind of a pain when you're making a starship.
Right. A huge pain and inconvenience, Manny.
Absolutely. And so the dependence that we have now on these, I want to drive a car. Well, Carl Sagan said it first, before you can make an apple pie, first you have to invent the universe. You need a huge car plant that is filled with people who work there and assemble the car so that and you have to make a bunch of them and a volume so that I can afford to have this amazing technology, which is called a car. Now, but in this world, you never want for anything. There's you're never lacking. It's like you would never talk to another person about like, I lost my whistle. Okay.
Right.
It would change your perception of your attachment to that whistle.
Yeah, there, a point we might have been able to add in here that just occurs to me, Manny, is the idea that people's relationships to the items that they consume, that they own, would be really different in a world in which you can make them on demand. We wouldn't feel this possessiveness towards, certain things that we think build our identity when you buy 5 or 6 of the same collectibles or it's just that would change, and I would have to say probably for the better. People would be less materialistic. People probably wouldn't hoard as much, and you could really pursue a nomadic lifestyle if you wanted to, knowing that whatever you needed, again, you wake up in Mumbai, then you decide to transport out to Ireland, then next year in Glasgow, and you need a bike. It's like you replicate one while you're there to do your tour, and then when you're about to leave to come back home to New York, you put that back in the recycling and you go home. It's not your bike, right?
I can't imagine it. Like, now that we've been thinking about it and talking about it, all this, exactly as you said, it's like not my bike. Like, there are certain items in Star Trek history. There's a great scene with Eddington when he has a Lucky Looney.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah.
you know, as a
Great
Canadian,
episode.
I get it.
For the uniform.
Right. Like, I love that
Yeah.
episode. So there are some material things that are meaningful, but it's rare. When Cisco brought his stuff out of storage to DS9 and he put it up, and then Jake's like, "Oh, this is home now," because it's like African masks. They're irreplaceable, like things.
Yeah.
He brings them on a starship, or like
The elder Cisco was a bit of a hoarder with his African art. But when you see guys like Picard and they're bringing their rucksack, it's like, wow, like it's just a bag he threw over his shoulder. There's a book in it. There's like some artifact that he really likes.
Yeah.
And, you know, but it's not like a huge storage pod full of stuff like it would be for us today in terms of trying to preserve all of the commodity level items that we had to buy and we had to work hard for and need to keep and protect. I just, you know, I think your footprint in terms of possessions that are important to you or have some sentimental value will be drastically reduced.
Definitely. I agree. And I look forward to talking more about this, but unfortunately our time is coming to a close, my friend. I know. We've come to the end, which is not always a bad thing, but
not at all.
This was a really great conversation. I'm really enjoying it. I'm here early in the morning, so as we record, you can start to see.
Yeah, I see the sun is coming up, so that does mean it's our time, right? Well, I have had a fantastic time on the show talking about this, talking about it conceptually. And I just want to say thanks for having me, Manny.
Oh, no, man. Thank you so much. And please, like, I can't wait to have you on other things. And I can't wait to have more of these types of conversations, because as we are getting into it, even now, just having had to talk about, I'm thinking about it and reflecting in a way that I never thought about. And it's making my viewing of Star Trek richer.
Yeah.
That's for me, you know, it's a lot of the takeaways. Like, wow, I never really thought about it. So I want to say thank you so much for being here and helping me see things in a different way and helping explain some things and being part of the conversation. Thank you so much, Lord Deathman.
You're so welcome.
Okay, we'll see you next time.
Now, again, I'm going to say this again because we're near the end of our show. If you are our allies, we are not talking to you. We are not talking to you. This does not... Okay? We're not talking to you. Stop trying to take our and make it your goddamn business. It ain't got nothing to do with you. It ain't got nothing to do with you.
Our experience of grief independently.
Bruh.
Yes.
I love that they're in the comments.
So much is like, I'm just reading the comments.
Yeah. They should broaden their child out. That's such a good point, Will. God, that's such a good point. And he's really thought about it too. You should be here. Will, get over here.
I thought he had a girlfriend on Insta. It's been ages since I've mucked about, but.
Okay, moving on. Let's move on.
We gotta move on.